In terms of your FOI and what you've been working on, just run us through some of the ways that you've managed to successfully challenge some of the refusals of FOI, and maybe any tips to anyone who's listening about just general courses of action you can take when you're running into stumbling blocks when trying to use a freedom of information request to substantiate anything or find out new information.
Well, one of the exemptions that Essex Police tried to use was that they said that they couldn't really, because I asked for all of the files from the reinvestigation of the King and Tanner case in 2016-17. They said they couldn't give them to me because they would give away policing tactics. So I knew that this is a historic investigation. So the tactics they were using were looking at old records, knocking on people's doors and asking them questions, maybe looking up people's names on the police national computer. They weren't running sophisticated, groundbreaking technology here to track paedophiles live on the internet or something. There was no tactic that they were using which any old person on the street would not already know about. Everybody knows the police knock on people's doors and ask them questions and take statements. So I found that particularly egregious, and I mounted a challenge to that, and at the very time that they made this argument, they had signed a deal with Sky Television to make a series called The Force Essex, where camera crews were embedded in the police cars and in the police offices, the police headquarters, filming officers going about their daily business on all sorts of cases, from abuse cases to domestic violence to car chases and stolen cars, murders. They were just being followed around for a fly-on-the-wall TV series. So the argument that I mounted to the Information Commissioner was, how on earth can Essex Police, within the space of 1 year, sign a deal to embed cameras with its own police officers for a reality TV show, but then say they can't answer my questions because it would divulge policing tactics? The other thing that forces have started, lots of people have started using in recent years, until about 2019, I didn't even know that this exemption existed in terms of freedom of information, because nobody had ever invoked it before in like 10 years of me using freedom of information on a regular basis. It's called Section 38. And Section 38 is a sort of a health and safety exemption, which says that they don't have to release information if releasing it could damage the mental health of any person. So basically, if somebody somewhere could hypothetically find the information that you've requested upsetting, then they don't have to give it to you. They don't have to tell you who they're protecting. They don't have to give you any evidence that that person is opposed to the information being released. So I've got a case going on right now where the family of a deceased woman have contacted me to raise concerns over the fact that they believe that she may have been murdered by her husband, and that the police bungled the investigation. There was an inquest where some of this evidence was heard. And they want me to look into the police failings. And so I've requested certain documents from the Metropolitan Police with the consent of the deceased lady's family. They have come back to say that the deceased lady's family may find it upsetting if the files are released, and therefore they can't give it to me, even though I've already told them that they want me. They were the ones that asked me to request the files. So they just invoke this outrageous. This shouldn't even exist as an exemption. This is a very British thing. I mean, in America, for example, if I wanted to find out about mistakes in the investigation into that deceased lady's death, I would be able to go down to the police station and say, here's my press card, I want the file, and they would give me the file. If there was a court case, I'd be able to go down to the courthouse, show them my press ID, and say, I want the file, and they would give it to me. In England, you can't get anything. You have to fight tooth and nail. So in the Shoebury case, it took me 3 years to get hold of the King and Tanner investigation from 2016-17, I had to fight Essex Police for about 2 years and then go through the impartial watchdog, the ICO, for another year. And even when I won, I won against Essex Police and the NPCC within a couple of months, 2 long-running battles. I was the first person in UK history to win access to deceased offenders' records through freedom of information. In America, you don't even need freedom of information. You can just go to the police station and get it. That's it. And we live in such an incredibly secret, closed society, which is so establishment. Everything is controlled by the establishment, and us plebs have access to absolutely nothing. We're not allowed access to anything. We have to fight and fight and fight to get it. It's just disgusting. And the existence of Section 38 is an absolute outrage. To have a Freedom of Information Act which has an exemption built into it that says if a hypothetical person could hypothetically find it upsetting, we don't have to give you the information. That's just a disgrace. It's just an absolute disgrace. So that needs undoing. That just needs to be deleted from the Act. It's an outrage.
It just kind of gives them the ability to pick and choose the requests that they wish to answer and the ones that they wish to refuse. Having something like that in there. I mean, you touched on it very, very strongly there, and I just want to delve into that a little bit more. We're kind of coming near to the end of the show now, but you've been fighting tooth and nail to bring this stuff to light. Fighting for transparency, and as you say, I mean, the laws and regulations around particular data and information that you've been trying to get access to would be as simple as walking down the police station in America. What do we need to change to be able to have a more transparent system? And secondly to that, why is it important to have transparency in this kind of information that you're requesting as well?
I'll start with the second question. So the reason it's important is because we fund the police, we fund the courts, we fund the councils, we fund all of public life through our taxes. And we as taxpayers are entitled to know that the systems that we're paying for are or are not working. We need to be able to scrutinize these systems because there are terrible failures, and these failures, we're paying for them. That's us. We've paid for that. We've paid for the child abuse survivors in Shoebury to have their lives destroyed. That's how we've paid for that. We've got the bill. So we have a right to scrutinize what's happened and demand better from the people that we're paying to act on our behalf, because these systems all exist allegedly to serve the public interest. Laws exist to protect the public. Courts exist to protect the public. The police exist to protect the public. They charge the public for that protection. If they're not doing their jobs properly, we have a right to know about it. We have to be able to scrutinize what they're doing. What needs to happen is the Freedom of Information Act. Certainly some of it needs to be overhauled. So there should be information that you can access without the Freedom of Information Act for a start. We shouldn't need the Freedom of Information Act to find out about people's court convictions and things like that. That's disgusting. It's a disgrace. That's public record. It's already been heard in a public courtroom. We should be able to access that. The Act itself needs changing. Section 38 should not exist. There are other exemptions which definitely need tightening up so that the Act is very nebulous and vague in places. So, for example, there's exemptions for material gathered in police investigations, and it just says something like subject to a public interest test. So material gathered by police in an investigation is exempt unless it's in the public interest to release it. Well, who decides what's in the public interest? I would say that overwhelmingly in almost all cases where journalists are asking for information, they're doing so because there's a public interest. Yeah, almost nothing triumphs at public interest test stage. You have to fight and fight and fight. So the Act needs tightening up. Section 38 needs removing completely. That shouldn't exist. It's just a disgrace. And also we need a regulator which is not toothless. So the ICO, I usually win when I go to the ICO. I very rarely lose, but it takes so long. The ICO is underfunded. It takes months, if not years, to get your case heard. If you're a journalist, you're generally requesting that information for a journalistic purpose. And what happens is the public body succeeds. It achieves its intended outcome, even if it loses the ICO case. Because if it takes you a year to get the data, then by the time you get it, it's a year out of date. In most cases. Now, my case is unique because I'm reporting specifically on a historic case. So even if I have to wait 5 years to win an ICO appeal, there'll still be a merit in that information when I get it. But if you're trying to access information about annual crime data or something like that, something that they're not giving you right now, it's very possible that by the time you get it in a year's time or 18 months' time following an ICO appeal, it won't be relevant anymore. It won't be newsworthy. The moment to use it to hold power to account is gone because the chief constable that was in charge at that time has gone. The government that was in charge at that time has been voted out, etc. So if we're going to properly hold power to account, we need these cases to be resolved quickly. And the current ICO system doesn't allow that. It has too little resource, too little staff, and too many cases to adjudicate. And in the meantime, what you said is very true. Public bodies are able to pick and choose. So you have a situation where a police force can choose to cooperate with 24 hours in police custody on Channel 4 and hand over vast amounts of information, police interview recordings. They allow the cameras into the cells to film the people in their prison cells and so on and so forth. And yet I, as a journalist at a local paper, want to get hold of information which is nowhere near as intrusive as what they're freely handing to Channel 4, and they won't give it to me. So you have a situation where there's no parity. The police can pick and choose what they tell people about what cases. They can cover up what they want to cover up and trumpet what they want to trumpet, and that's not how a democracy is supposed to function. And that doesn't help us to hold power to account. We all have to have access, and we all have to have the ability to scrutinize equally. Otherwise, nothing